I'm John Graft, and I love Chicago real estate. Between showings, I stop in my favorite places, talk with local business owners, and bring their story to you. This is my Chicago.
Did you look into anything else before you got into solar?
We got quotes from people back in the day at my dad's house, and they just were like not doing it right. And I'm like, I could fucking do this better. Not saying like I can't, but I was just like, this can be a better process.
What was it about it? What was bad about the process when they quoted your dad?
Way too many numbers, pushing random stuff at you, and like
pushing things, trying to sell things, or giving you more information where you kind of have this analysis
it just
paralysis
seemed
situation.
Too confusing and convoluted, and like I was like, this can be simpler, easily understood, a little bit more transparent, and I was like, I can do this differently. And then it's obviously an emerging market.
Yeah.
It's job security there.
So it's only going up, I imagine.
Yeah, so like building a business in this market, I'm like, okay, it's not like a dying market where you're starting a business. So
are there a lot of competitors in the space?
It's very competitive.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not a lot, but when you're in the grind competing, it is very competitive. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a passion-based industry. I don't make as good of margins as I would love to.
Yeah.
But you do it for the love of the sport.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So.
What were the struggles when you were starting?
Everything. Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were you doing before this?
Selling IT and telecom.
Okay, so you were already selling things.
So I could sell, yeah. I could manage teams and crush sales. So I like had that, and then I started a little baby business. I imported art from Vietnam. Actually, I traveled there, and
that's cool.
I was like, I need to start a little baby business, see if I can generate revenue and get everything set up before I start a real business.
Yeah.
So that worked, and then I was like, cool, let's dive into this.
So you started this, and you're doing it because of the passion. You're doing it because of everything you love doing. Like, it's a lot to start a business, especially someone who has a business, someone who's had a business for a very long time. What made you want to do this?
You know, we have a lot of issues going on with climate, whether people believe that or not. We have a carbon problem at the end of the day. So there's too much carbon being emitted by human activity. So
I like, so not to interrupt you, but like I like how you said that, because the climate thing, there's so many different sides of it. I mean, there's two sides of it, but both arguments are very compelling. You can hear very intelligent people tell you there's no issue, this is natural, or like we're going to die next year. But you're right. At the end of the day, we emit too much carbon.
Too much carbon. Yeah, and it is pretty much directly associated with human activity. We are burning fossil fuels, which emits a tremendous amount of carbon. And the reality is we obviously still need those fossil fuels to operate in our society. We just need to use a lot less of them. And with the technology available, we can deploy a tremendous amount of solar, wind, battery backup to eliminate peaker plants, which are really dirty, expensive plants that we turn on during peak periods. So batteries are emerging in that market too. But at the end of the day, we need to use less fossil fuels. And it really is just taking accountability for our electricity usage. However we want to do that, but the thing that helps with that is the incentives that are available. So subsidies, I guess you can call it. And a lot of people are like, oh, subsidies, you know, taxpayer dollars.
Well, if the government makes them available, if you don't take them, someone else is going to take them.
Yes. But what a lot of people don't realize is like the oil and gas companies are subsidized to the nines. Like billions and billions of dollars go to them. So we're subsidized very little compared to those guys. But those incentives that are available, especially in Illinois right now, are absolutely huge. So Illinois just passed a bill called the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. And that bill is one of the biggest climate and solar bills in the country. So there's hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into that program to cut checks to people to go solar. And those incentives are based on system production. So the more your system produces, the more money that you'll get from that. And checks usually get cut within about 12 months of being installed.
Do they continue to cut?
So it's in a tiered step-down program. So it's called the adjustable block program. The first blocks are the highest paying blocks, and there's a certain amount of solar capacity in that. Once that capacity fills up, it steps down 4%. When that fills up 4%, some of the rules I think are changing right now, but it steps down. But they will be available apparently for the next 8 to 10 years. This is a big program in Illinois.
So it's guaranteed for that time period. I've never heard of a peaker plant before. So a peaker plant, is that a separate facility that only goes into play once you're at peak capacity?
So a peaker plant is more like utility scale power. So like all ComEd facilities here, for example, have their regular operating power plant, but then in the summertime when everyone's cranking air conditioning, and that power plant needs to generate a little bit more to cover that demand, there's usually a secondary power plant, natural gas or coal, that they have to spin up that's usually really expensive and dirty to do that, to kind of cover that additional. So what a lot of utilities are shifting towards is just large battery banks that have that stored up to just provide instant power to cover that little excess demand for a few hours a day, I guess.
Okay.
So that's like utility scale, kind of a separate animal. But this legislation is shutting down the dirtiest and most expensive coal plants in Illinois once we've had some years to it. So it's a really good program. Yeah.
So when I think Illinois, I do not think solar. Why am I wrong?
There's a lot of misconceptions with that. So we don't have enough sun here. What about the winter? All sort of valid points. Solar works wherever the sun is shining. So obviously there's areas in the world that get more sun hours or more direct sun irradiance than others. But if you can walk outside and you can see outside, solar can be producing. It's like as simple as that. You look outside, if it's not dark, your system's producing. Another thing people don't realize is that solar panels produce a little bit more in cooler temperatures.
Okay.
So in the southwest U.S., it's super hot, but hot panels get voltage loss and you lose a little bit of production.
That makes sense because they're overheating.
They're overheating, yep.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of cool...
The equipment, it's going to run at its best capacity when it's at a lower temperature, but it's bringing in the... So is it bringing UVA and UV... Like, what is it? What is the panel actually bringing in?
It's bringing in like little photons and atoms that are shooting around, and then that creates the electricity that we use. That's actually DC electricity, and then it goes to an inverter. There's a couple different types. There's microinverters, little baby inverters, or central inverters where it converts from DC to usable AC, which is what we all use every day. So that's how that works. But some of the other misconceptions is, so obviously we have good temperature here. It's not super hot. I mean, it is for a few months, but the 70-degree sunny is optimal solar production weather. Winter is obviously another thing. What happens when snow falls? Your system will be down in the event of snowfall. A couple days. Last February, we had like all of our systems down for like 3 weeks. Kind of an anomaly sort of weather, but we account for all the snow losses in our annual production. And then, January and February are the lowest producing months out of the entire year anyways, so you're not really losing a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. We look at the entire year's worth of production for your system. So you're making most of your solar production in the summer, obviously when we have peak sunshine going on.
So basically when your panels are covered with snow, they're not receiving anything? Not
receiving anything, yep.
Okay.
So you're pulling from ComEd at that point. So solar is a dual power source. So you have ComEd feeding in and then the solar feeding in, and they're interacting together, working together. When solar is producing, you are consuming all of that at the time it's being produced, and then any excess is going to the grid. And here in ComEd, we get a dollar for dollar rebate for that. So whatever you send back, you get a little credit on your bill, and you can use that credit during the winter months when the solar is not producing as much. So this program is really, really important here. It allows you to sort of level out your production through the entire year. So when we design a system that's 100% offset, you're going to be banking a lot of that in the summer, shifting that to the winter so that you can have basically no supply charges on your bill.
I've never fully understood sending the energy back to the grid. Is it like literally your meter is reversing and ComEd is acknowledging that? Is it sending it through the in of your electric back to them? How does that work?
That's a good question. So it used to turn the meters back, but now we're on all smart meters, digital meters. Mm-hmm. So it is digitally tracking what you send back. But what you send back during the day, then you're going to pull down at night. So kind of on a daily level, it can even out, monthly level. So we just look at like monthly snapshots of how much you've sent to the grid, pulled from the grid, and then we solve for X to see how much you self-consumed based on the production. So there's some like math involved there. We can install some extra meters that track all of this stuff. So it's just interesting how that can all play out. Yeah.
So are you can you actually, with the meters that you add, are you seeing what you're sending back, or are you relying on ComEd to tell you that?
So without that, it's called a revenue grade meter. We can install consumption monitors and all of that. In theory, yes, we're relying on ComEd's truth with that. And it is truthful and reliable. I know that's shocking to say that a utility company is actually telling the truth.
It's just hard when you have no third party. You're like, okay, so I just believe everything you say, right?
And we get those questions a lot because they're like, hey, this isn't adding up. Because there are some missing numbers, like how much you self-consume isn't tracked. So when someone's seeing their bill, I sent this much and I pulled this much, but it's not lining up. That's because they're self-consuming a lot of it. Okay. But these meters, these extra meters, can keep everything honest. They are, a few $100s to install. Typically, homeowners are super excited to track that for like the first month, and then they never look at it again.
Yeah.
So it's like, just kind of trust the system, I guess.
Well, I'd imagine the person who wants to add this is into it. I mean,
yes.
I would imagine that most people are doing this for the idea of helping the planet, the whole philosophy behind it, for those type of ideas instead of trying to save a little money.
It's a combination of all things, usually. I like to ask our clients that, what's your main reason? And it's usually a blend of all of that. I want to do the right thing for the environment, add value to the house. I want to save a little bit money along the way. So all of those things come together, but it is interesting. When we turn a system on, it does change the lifestyle in the household, which is one of the best things about it. I've had clients that have, kids in 3rd grade that do projects on the solar system at their house, and it's a lifestyle change that's just really interesting to know that you're not, adding to the fuel to the fire, but with your consumption, but you're, kind of net zeroing it out and taking accountability for your electricity usage.
It's cool to call it a solar system. You just said that. I was like, oh, it is a solar system.
It's a solar system.
It's a system unto itself.
Yep.
So when I think of solar, one of the first things I think of is like Tesla and the roof panels that they're doing.
Yep.
What's up with those?
So Tesla bit off a lot more than they can chew with that, which is great. That's an emerging new technology. That is really complicated. Solar is complicated in itself. When you start interacting the roofing trade and the electrical and the solar trade all together, it requires a pretty specialized team, and they're trying to deploy that across the entire country all at once, which I think is proving to be a little challenging to them. That will continue to evolve. It's just really hard to come out with new products in solar because it has to stand the test of time.
Yes.
It has to be worth the investment, and then it has to perform. So all of those things are coming into play. What we do is we deploy that style and image, but with all of the equipment that's available today. So really high-end all-black panels. We don't cut any corners with installation, and we hide all the conduit within the attic, so that's not visible on the house. We take an architectural approach to every single install, because every house is different, on how it'll look from the street level, the back of the house, how's it going to perform. All of these things come into play. We kind of put all the pieces together, so we have an absolutely beautiful system that's going to perform for a long time, that's got good warranty, hopefully American-made or American-assembled for the most part, and just be an overall good experience for the client. That's our goal.
When I think of Tesla, I think of that beautiful roof that's shingles, but they're all panels. Mm-hmm. Do you have a similar technology like that?
We have access to it, but we are not deploying that at this time.
Is it because it isn't tested and tried?
It's just our industry is complex enough. Working with new materials is complex enough. But also, in order to deploy that sort of system, the client has to be ready for a roof replacement.
Okay.
So you really are installing that when you're doing a roof replacement.
Because everything you're doing is retrofitting.
Mostly retrofitting.
Okay.
We do a lot of, we work with roofers all the time, analyzing roof replacements as well. About like almost 30-40% of our clients will need a new roof in order to put solar on. Because you want to have a newer roof before you put that on, so you don't have to put solar on and then replace the roof 5 years later.
So are they thinking I need a new roof, so I might as well consider this as well?
A little bit of both. I think it stems from I want to go solar, but hey, my roof might be a little old, so let's look at that as well. And we kind of, every situation is a little bit different. But at the end of the day, you want to have a relatively newer roof so that you don't have to pay us to come back out and remove the panels, do the roof, and then reinstall, because that just adds money at the end of the day.
So you talked about aesthetics. When I think of typical solar panels, I think of these big blocks or sheets of glass on top of a roof. How do you blend that into the home to work the aesthetics?
So they are big rectangular blocks. There's different styles of panels. Different manufacturers have different methods of how the aesthetic the panels are. Our highest end one, they take the solar cells and they cut them in little strips and shingle them down the panel and then hide all the electrical on the back sheet. So it's just a jet black panel. Black framing, we use black racking, black mounts. So everything is black, like a kind of like a stealth fighter if we want to like put that up there. And we try to blend it as much as we can. There's only certain things that we can do, but you know, symmetrical rectangles, and you know, we try to fit the form of the roof. I'm not a fan of just putting panels randomly everywhere. Some companies do that, but we almost take the approach of aesthetics over production in some cases.
I would think so, because it has to have the blend of both for you to be really happy with it, I would imagine.
Yeah, we have to walk that.
It has to look good.
It has to look good, because it's going to be on your roof for like 25 to 40 years. So there's a fine line between aesthetics and production that we try to match and meet those needs with every client. And we do put a tremendous amount of time into every single install. I lose sleep over installs just because I care that much, because it is going to be on your house for a long time.
You know, we haven't talked about it, but we know each other from high school.
Yes.
And you were always artistic, so I'd imagine you're kind of having this artistic idea of like what's the best way to deploy this and make it look good.
Yes, and we will work with the homeowner, the business owner, go back and forth. We'll redesign it 20 times over if you want. Look at different panels, layouts, pricing metrics, all of that. At the end of the day, we're not pushing any one type of system on anyone. We're here to educate on the matter, make some suggestions, and then let the customer let us know if they're ready to move forward, or let us know if they want something switched up. And that's kind of how we operate. It's really just a passion-based delivery of spreading the word, letting people know that they can do it in a beautiful manner. When it's deployed beautifully with high-quality equipment, it does add value to the house in some form or fashion. As you know, it's only going to add the value as the buyer is willing to pay for it.
Yeah,
in the
beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, exactly. But that's why, like, we don't design systems for what it looks like today. We do literally design it for you put your house up on the MLS 15 years from now, and that realtor takes a drone picture of your house. What's the buyer going to think of it? Like, that's how I go to the drawing board with designs. So
you said 25 to 40 years. What is the pace of the innovation in this industry? How often are you seeing new panels come out or new technology? Something that's going to, if I'm going to install this, I'm like, well, in 10 years, am I going to need new panels? How does that thought process work?
We get that question a lot. So solar panels in the past 10 years, and equipment too, have dropped in cost about 70% in the past decade. That's kind of changed a little bit recently. Costs are obviously up with everything. With everything.
Yeah.
Technology actually moves fast and slow. The panels will gain in wattage maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 watts every year. They usually shift every 6 months.
What's a lot of wattage? So if it's increasing by that every year, what's the baseline now, and where was it 5 years ago?
Yeah, so 5 years ago was maybe like a 280 watt. Now we're at like the 400 watt sort of. So that's like the 5-year evolution, something like that. It's kind of, you know, shooting from the hip a little bit, but maybe like every year they gain about 10 or 20 watts per panel. So, you know, 10 years from now, if someone wants to switch it out, it doesn't quite make sense. If you have disposable income, we can do anything you want.
Yeah, right.
But you really want to just live out the life of that system. That's why we want to deploy the latest and greatest, best looking equipment today, so that it will stand the test of time in the future. When, you know, you have to replace your roof in 20 to 25, 30 years, depending, you pull those off, that would be a good time to put some new ones back on.
Okay.
But yeah, we don't just swap them out just because there's something newer out. That just costs you more money at the end of the day.
What is the efficiency? So if it's hitting that, if the energy is hitting the solar panel, how much are you able to capture?
About 20%. So 20% efficient. 20%. Yeah, and you know, that's just, we don't need to get lost in the weeds with all of that, because it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you just look at the whole project.
If I'm outside for 20 minutes in the sun, I'm hot. So like, if it's beating all day long, that's a lot of energy.
Yeah, and really what we're after is kilowatt hour output. So this panel, X size panel, is going to produce X amount of kilowatt hours. Your whole system is going to produce X amount of kilowatt hours. So we don't really get lost in the efficiency and all of this stuff. I mean, some people do, but at the end of the day, you want a good quality panel that's got good, or system that has the kilowatt hour output that you're looking for from a manufacturer that you trust, an installer that you trust, and all of that. So all panels are about 20 to 22% efficient right now for stuff that we install.
Okay. People that put so like going back to the Tesla batteries in their homes. So can you hook your solar system up to something like that so you have a generator? Yes.
So we talk about batteries a lot throughout the day. Illinois right now is not particularly a battery market because of that ComEd program that I talked about, where you send your overproduction to the grid. Mm-hmm. In theory, they're your free battery with that arrangement. And batteries are still a little bit expensive right now. Yeah, they're definitely expensive right now. So in that instance, you would be purchasing that battery purely for an outage. We actually have a pretty reliable grid up in here.
We don't have that issue like some other places do, I know.
Yeah.
I can think of a few times in my life where power went out.
Yeah, we have a reliable grid. So, you know, for folks to spend that much money, I mean, batteries like a Tesla Powerwall, total installed cost can be anywhere from like 15 to 20,000. Okay. To use that maybe a few hours a year doesn't quite pencil out. Some instances it does if, you know, you have critical medical loads at the house, business servers at the house, you know, things that absolutely have to be up and running. Sure, those make sense. But you know, that's still an infancy stage market that's going to be continually evolving as time goes on. And then, of course, we have international relations where people are worried about what's going to happen on their grid, like the electricity grid on a big scale. So we have been having a lot of those conversations. But at the end, you know, our grid's reliable. So.
How much do those walls hold? Like, how many hours do you get if you were to spend 15 or 20 grand, install that battery wall?
Yeah, so there's different sizes of batteries. You know, there's 10 kilowatt hours, 14 kilowatt hours. You can stack 2 or 3 or 4 of them and, you know, and chain them up. So in that regard, we have to really calculate what the goal is for the homeowner, what their budget is, how many hours or days they want to have continuity with their critical loads panel. A lot of times we're not going to power the whole house and the AC unit and all of that. We want to just do a critical loads panel to keep them operating with sump pump, garage door, internet, some lights and fridge and all of that. So what's the duration of period that we can power those items and you know, kind of understand the budget of the homeowner and all of that. There's definitely wants and then needs, and we try to separate the two. So you can want a lot of batteries, but does it make sense at the end of the day? Probably not.
Do you have an average consumer?
As far as demographic?
No, I mean, maybe. Like when you're talking with someone, why are they calling you? You know, are they calling you because they want to do this? Are they doing this because they think it might be more efficient for them? Is it more economical? Is it more environmental? Is it more philosophical?
We touched a little bit about this earlier. It's a blend of all of those things. There's a lot of awareness for what's happening with, you know, the carbon topic that we talked about earlier, and it's people wanting to do the right thing. You know, we all have to take accountability for our own little bubble that we live in, and you know, we can all make change one person at a time, one situation at a time, improving our life a little bit more every year. So a lot of our clients are, yeah, I want to do solar this year, and then I want to get an electric car the next year and power my electric car by the sun. Mm-hmm. And then I want to, you know, eat meat one less day a week, or, you know, all of those little things, you know, we find our clients trying to do a little bit more every day. And we all should practice that. How can we better ourselves every day? And that's kind of the basis of our whole organization, is just trying to make a positive change one house at a time, one install at a time, one conversation at a time. Because we have to make some moves.
So what's the process like, front to start, someone who's interested in this?
So the first step is to get a copy of their electricity bill. We look at the previous 12 months of their consumption, the kilowatt hour consumption, and then we go to the drawing board. We custom model everything from scratch, 3D model. We use satellite imagery, LiDAR integration, irradiance mapping, and then we size a system to match to produce their match consumption, I guess. So if they're consuming 10,000 kilowatt hours per year, we're going to size a system to produce that amount, or maybe a little bit more.
That's something I would have never even thought about. Yeah.
Yeah. And we take into account different things. So are they going to get an electric car next year? Are some of their kids moving out and going to college and maybe their consumption is going to be a little bit less? Or will they plan to add more in the future? Maybe we're going to upsize the inverter or accommodate for those things. So there's a lot to take into account.
So once you decide that, what's the next step?
Next step is we will confirm everything with a very thorough site assessment. So we come out, inspect everything, get the heights of all the trees, widths of the trees. We'll fly a drone. We have a DJI Mavic 2 Pro, and we just press a button, and it takes tons of pictures on the house. We upload that to AutoCAD, cross-reference the design, have a discussion with the homeowner, and just see, do we want panels here, understand their budget and their needs, and then put some final numbers in front of them. From signature and down payment to completion is about 8 to 10 weeks. We have to go through structural engineering, so we take structural measurements, and we have engineers calculate the snow load, the weight load, the wind uplift, all of those things to make sure the structure can handle 1,000+ pounds on the roof. And then we submit the permit, order the equipment, and a residential install will take about 2 to 3 days typically. Okay. Commercial install is obviously a little bit more involved.
Do you see a lot of commercial installs?
We do, yeah. So it does ebb and flow based on incentive availability. So now we have commercial incentives available, and there's a tremendous amount of demand for commercial.
How about financing?
Yeah, we always prefer a cash purchase. It's going to be the quickest, best return on investment for a homeowner. That's, not everyone has tens of thousands of dollars sitting around. So we do offer a really great financing option where it's just straight interest only. There's no dealer fees. There's a lot of solar financiers out there that have large dealer fees, and that's how they make their money. We kind of deviated from that. And we do a two-loan plan. We do one loan for the incentives, the tax credit, 26% tax credit, which we actually didn't talk about yet. And then the Illinois incentive. When they receive those, that loan goes away, and then we do a 10-year loan on the net cost, what's left over. And that's going to be about equal or less than what they're paying with their electricity today. And then once it's paid off, it's all gravy. So average homeowner saves about $1,200 to $1,400 annually on a solar system.
Okay, so that's a lot.
That's a lot. Yeah, it adds up. And it's definitely a low risk investment, low risk, medium yield investment to kind of put your money to work, knowing that you're going to get it back and you're doing the right thing along the way.
Let's say you have a 2,600 square foot home or maybe a 4,000 square foot home. What type of investment are we talking about?
So we do get that question a lot. You could have the smallest home around and be powering 2 electric cars and mining Bitcoin, and your electricity bill is through the roof. So I don't actually look at square footage. I take that into account a little bit. But some of our smaller residential installs are 20 to 25. I'd say is probably the average. The largest, we're going up to $40,000, $50,000.
Okay. 26%
tax credit comes back when they file their taxes, so you get about a quarter of that off. And then the Illinois incentive could be up to 30 to 35% of the incentive that comes back in the form of a check, about 12 months as well. So
you have a 26 government, federal, and then you have up to 35 Illinois?
Depends, yeah. So a significant chunk of that, 50-60% of the system cost is coming back 12 months from now.
Okay.
So that's a huge selling point for people. It helps tremendously with the adoption of solar. Without that, we probably wouldn't deploy a lot. I mean, there's obviously people that want to do it and are in it for the long term, but this is a really hot market right now. It's a great opportunity to take advantage of it, do the right thing, help support the community with clean energy and all of that.
I think net zero homes are a really cool idea. Mm-hmm. I don't see, sometimes you see them built on spec, very rare. Usually you see it as someone building a home from scratch. They're doing geothermal energy, they're doing solar, they're doing everything. Have you ever worked on any projects trying to do a net zero home?
So we haven't worked, we have our hands in a ton of different cookie jars, but you know, new construction can be a little bit tough with solar because we don't know how much they're going to consume.
Yeah.
So we definitely do a lot of new construction, but we have to sort of walk with caution. We don't want to oversize it. We don't want to undersize it. Sometimes construction plans change, and we have to kind of, you know, change with it. So we don't work a whole lot on total net zero new construction, but retrofitting that along the way, absolutely. Yeah.
So running this business, I imagine you have a number of different elements. You have contractors that are working for you that are installing this. You have the engineers. You have the people like looking over the systems. Can you walk me through the different steps?
Yeah, it can be pretty complex. When we explain all the steps to homeowners, sometimes their head spins, but we try to make it as simple as possible. So yeah, we deal with suppliers for equipment. The supply changes almost by the day. We deal with electricians either doing service panel upgrades, you know, commissioning the system. We have the roof crew that's doing all the mounts and putting up the rails and panels. We deal with, you know, structural engineers working on structural integrity of the house. We deal with villages and counties. All of them are different, all have different requirements, so we have to, you know, kind of customize our applications and requirements with that. We have National Electric Code that we have to abide by, building codes, fire codes. There's a lot of moving parts. All of those things are constantly changing and evolving. Makes my head spin.
And in every municipality.
Everyone's different.
Yeah.
So if there's challenges that come along the way, nothing that we can't handle. But you know, a lot of times we're working. It's us and the homeowner together trying to solve something that the village is being difficult about, or supply chain shortages right now. We kind of have to switch things up and maybe switch to a different panel last minute, and we never push anything on a homeowner. We're all working together to accomplish the goal and just kind of get over some of these hurdles and move forward. But we try to make it as simple as possible for our homeowners, take the brunt of all the challenges and just try to make it a smooth, really good process. A lot of homeowners are skeptical with contractors. We try to go against the grain with that. We want it to be a beautiful experience, so we handle all of that. And we also handle all of the incentives. We process all the documentation and paperwork to make sure that's going well. We also monitor the systems. Every 2 weeks, we look at all of our systems on our monitors on a panel level basis, make sure everything's producing as it should.
So you can see all the systems you've installed. Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
On one pane of glass.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
So the homeowner can do that? Can they do that from their phone?
They can do that on their phone, yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, so you can see how much it's producing right now, you know, day, week, month, year, you know, total system production. So this is the current power on this system, so I'm going to go to the daily production here. So this is the daily power here, and then we can even go down to the panel level and see how much each panel is producing. So
so this is the panel layout on the roof?
Panel layout, exactly how it is on the roof, and you see how many watt hours each is producing. I don't really look at the daily, there's too many variables in a day, so we usually look at monthly. So you see the individual production of those individual production, yep.
Oh, and they're all a little different, but they're pretty much all the same.
Yeah, they're all a little bit different, slightly. Not every panel is made exactly the same.
When the sun's hitting them all in different ways.
But for like a 400 watt panel, one might be like 401 watts. You know, it's like they're all a little bit different. But yeah, we can go into the weekly production here, if it'll press, monthly, and then annual, and kind of go back on that. So it's pretty cool. So you can see exactly what the system's doing at all times.
That's cool. So I imagine that's a third-party app?
It's the app for the inverter.
Okay.
So the inverter is like the brains, the computer. That's what converts the DC to AC electricity, and that's the brains of the operation. We connect that with either a hardwire Ethernet or a cellular kit, so it has internet connection, so it's reporting all of this data. And then we have to report this production to the Illinois Incentive Group for a 15-year period. So they're contractually obligated to produce a certain amount of electricity.
So I imagine if they want to sell back, they have to go on this type of program, is that right? Or like you have to report it.
So in order to receive your Illinois incentive paycheck, you have to agree that you're, I guess, digitally giving your power to the grid, or you're producing, you're adding this value to the Illinois infrastructure and in exchange for that, they're paying you money for that. But your system has to produce what we say or forecast it's going to produce for a 15-year period. So that's another reason why we do very thorough site assessments. We want you to meet or exceed your production every single year.
As a business owner, what's the hardest part of this?
It changes by the day, but keeping up, it's very hard to keep up. Things are just evolving and changing, and like I said before, nothing is ever consistent. That's also the most exciting part of the industry, because no day is the same. Mm-hmm. So it's just an exciting place to be. I wouldn't be anywhere else, but it's definitely a challenging industry. There's no doubt about it.
I imagine if you're trying to give back, trying to do something that's better, did you look at other areas? Is there one reason why you chose solar?
I chose solar because it seems the most, it's the simplest form that can be widely adopted by a homeowner or a business. Wind energy on a small scale is very challenging, and they typically, from what I have seen, fail within like 5 years.
Well, I can't throw a windmill up in my backyard.
Exactly, yeah. So solar, it's not, there's no moving parts except electrons moving around. It's pretty predictable. It's a compelling investment, low risk investment. So it just seemed like that was the way to go. And then there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity here. As we talked about earlier, people still don't think it works here, and most of our day is letting people know it does work.
Yeah.
And it can help, it does make a difference, and it can be a financial value to the home. So there's a lot of interesting things about it.
Does Illinois do anything to help with awareness?
Yeah, this legislation was it.
Okay. When did this pass?
This passed in September. Okay. This is the second.
So it's fresh.
Fresh.
Yeah.
This is the second legislation, though. It's a continuation of a 2017 legislation called the Future Energy Jobs Act. That really kicked things off. Funding ended for that in December 2020. All last year we had no incentives until this came about, and now the package is like 4 times bigger. So that's Illinois voters, legislators stepping up to make a positive change, and that's Illinois helping with this deployment.
I know someone who installs LED lights, mm-hmm. and I know he gets an incentive from ComEd for what he does, as well as the person that is having it installed.
Yep.
Do you have similar incentives?
This is the same, yeah, similar. Okay. So this is the Illinois incentive. Your system produces this amount for a 15-year period, and you get a check for that amount. Are
you receiving anything as a business for any install that you're doing, like adding to it?
No.
They should do that.
I mean, I wish. That sounds kind of nice.
That's what the LED business is. It's interesting. It's like for every light that he takes out and he installs another kind of light, ComEd gives him a check as long as he shows an invoice for it. I was like, that's a great business model.
Yeah, I know enough about LED to be dangerous, but I think the rules change with that quite a bit too. So I don't know exactly what the case is there, but really in this instance, the homeowner is totally benefiting from all of this. Obviously, we make our money and our margin from the purchase, and then they get those incentives on the back end. But the homeowner is really reaping all the benefits on this. Unless they do a solar lease, and you might hear $0 down solar. There's some big companies in the area that do that. I don't recommend anybody do that.
Yeah, walk me through that. I've never heard that before. What is that?
So yeah, the $0 down, it's basically leasing a system. So another company, whatever company it is going to own the system, and they're going to put it up on your house, and you're going to pay them for 20 years. So that's 240 payments. It's a very long time. You might save a little bit of money each month, but what's really happening is you're paying for way more of that. You're paying a tremendously larger premium on that system over a 20-year period than if you were to just purchase it or finance it. A good example is like, let's say, a $30,000 system. You get $20,000 of incentives. Your net cost is $10,000, so you're really paying $10,000 for that system. If you were leasing it, you'd probably pay $50,000 over the 20 years because the person that's leasing it to you, or the company, is keeping the tax credit. They're keeping the state incentive. And they're getting someone paying them for 20 years for this. So they're really the ones winning. And the homeowners don't normally know how this works. It sounds so great. I don't have to pay anything to go solar. And those are typically the installs that look a little atrocious, I guess you could say.
Well, if I'm just thinking as a business person, the only way it would work is if I'm reaping all the benefits, and I'm basically looking for, I'm getting the real estate at the lowest price possible because I'm putting it on top of the home. And so the owner's still paying, do they pay anything?
Yeah, they're still
paying every month, right? There's just no upfront cost?
They're basically shifting their money from ComEd to paying this company for their system. And they're saving maybe $5, $10, $20 per month.
But they're still paying
But they don't own the system. Someone else owns it. The problem with that is if you go to sell your house, usually a prospective buyer is not going to be a fan. Not going to be a fan that there's a long-term lease associated with this system that probably doesn't look that great on their house. And it convolutes the sale, and it's going to be really challenging to sell your house. You have to pay that lease down before you can put it on the market. Or remove it. A lot of times they get removed.
And if anything happens to it, I bet you're probably liable in some way.
It just is a really complicated process. So if anyone is considering zero down solar or a 20-year lease, I would highly reconsider that. The value is in ownership or either a cash purchase or financing it. You own that asset. You want to own something that's going to be highly visible on your house. That's the only way to go.
From a sales perspective, what's one of the more difficult aspects of this, and what's kind of the sales process look like?
Yeah, the challenging thing is that most folks are unfamiliar with solar. How does it work? How do the incentives work? What's the equipment like? What's the installation process? You're going to poke holes in my roof? Are you serious? All of those things come into play, so it's a lot of educating, walking them through it, making them comfortable. You're going to want to trust the company that's about to put something on your house like that. So we have a lot of those conversations. It just ends up we're friends with all of our customers. We have never had an unhappy customer, knock on wood, and we hope we never have. So that's the whole process with that.
The sales process. So the awareness is obvious, and I imagine you get lots of questions. People are installing this on their home. It's very personal. They're very, very risky, and they would think that, right? But if you're taking this approach, like you said, holes in the roof and all those different things, what are the applications that don't work?
Great question. If someone's renting, can't install solar. The property owner can and do an arrangement that way. If you have a lot of shade, if you've got tall trees around, solar needs sunlight. So that's usually not a good application unless the homeowner removes the trees, which, is a touchy subject, of course. Because at the end of the day, we want carbon. So you can't take a carbon capture to put. So and there are conversations like that. It's a time and place. But if they have an older roof and they just don't have it in the budget to replace the roof right now, sometimes it's, they're up for a roof replacement in the next 5 to 10 years. Maybe they don't want to accelerate that roof replacement right now with that extra capital expenditure to do solar. We come across that a lot with commercial. A commercial roof is super expensive to replace. So to try to accelerate that on the books to accommodate solar can kind of convolute the sale as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so you want fresh roof, you want to own your house, you want to have some available sunlight, and you're probably going to want to be in your house more than 5 years. So if you're about to move or you think you're about to move, probably not a good fit, although we have done those arrangements. But again, if you sell your house, it depends on the situation of if you're going to get that money back with the person that's buying it.
So as a realtor, I have the National Association of Realtors, I have the Chicago Association of Realtors, and I have boards all over that are there to support you in other things. What exists like that for solar?
We have the Illinois Solar Energy Association here in Illinois, and it's a group of installers and some community individuals and just a bunch of people working together to help. The simplest way is just working together, help move legislation, help educate, be a resource for homeowners, answer questions. We reach out to them all the time. What's going on with the legislation? Where are we at? It's a centralized group that helps us.
You pay dues into that?
Yeah, membership dues, just like anything.
And do they lobby on behalf of the trade group then?
They do, okay. Yeah. And then we all work together. You know, all of fellow installers. We're not enemies. We're just, you know, frenemies, I guess, working together.
It's like an abundance mindset or a famine mindset. I mean, there's a million homes. There's enough business for everyone.
Yes.
Everyone's going to approach it differently, and someone's going to like you or dislike you, or people are going to go with different companies for different reasons.
Yeah.
It was so funny when I came across this, because I was in that mindset of like, solar here, what? Tell me more. I'm very interested because I think it's a beautiful topic, but I haven't seen advertisements for it. I haven't seen a lot of people doing it. I feel, and I'm complete ignorant on the topic. Are there a ton of installers doing this? Are there people dialing phones every day trying to get, panels on roofs?
There are. It's growing by the day. We're in a growing state, growing segment, growing market. It's not going anywhere. So there's companies popping up more and more every day. I'm sure there's a lot of people making dials and all of that. We operate a little bit differently. About 80% of our business is referrals. So we're not really hitting the phones. We're accommodating folks that we're connected to or in our network. But yeah, it's actively growing. You may see some advertisements here and there, social media, maybe not any billboards. Us solar installers, we have to keep things very frugal. They call it the solar coaster. Things are good when they're good, and when they're not good, we don't have incentives. Things can get a little dicey, but we've leveraged our business model for the long run, keep costs low, keep overhead low, so that we can be around for a long time.
As a business person, how do you manage all of it?
Time, a lot of hours in the day. Being an entrepreneur it requires sacrifices with family, friends, activities. It just takes hours in the day to bring it all together. A lot of learning, a lot of growing, a lot of meeting with people, and it just takes hours, but it's fun,
If someone wanted to do this, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can reach out to our website, ilumenpv.com.
Spell that.
ilumenpv.com. It stands for photovoltaics. We're actually changing our domain right now.
Okay.
I thought it was cool back in the day. I'm like, PV, photovoltaics, and nobody knows what that is. So it's going to be ilumen-solar coming at you soon.
Okay.
If you just Google us, we'll pop up. We operate in Barrington, but all the northwest suburbs, all Chicagoland area, northern Illinois, and that's the easiest way to get a hold of us.
Is there a part or region of Illinois that you do more installs in? I mean, probably northwest because you're there.
Northwest, yeah. We're close to home. We're really involved in the community there. We'll do Plainfield, Hyde Park. We'll go out to Galena. We'll go out to farm site, wherever. If someone's interested in working with us, we'll obviously work with them as well. And we'll also get creative with difficult jobs, difficult roof membranes or new materials. Like we do try to deviate and accommodate to those things, but typically close to home, but we'll go anywhere.
Does anyone do the panels not just on their roof, but like a field? And
Yeah, ground mounts are a big thing. So not everyone has the ideal roof. Or maybe they have a lot of shade on the roof, but they have a big yard. Or maybe you're on a farm where the farm structure is maybe not that great, but you've got several acres. So we either do ground screws or concrete piles, and then lay out a ground mount, and then trench it back to the house. So there's a little added expense to doing a ground mount, but you can make it an ideal south-facing, perfect tilt. And the production that you gain from that orientation makes up for the extra cost of doing that type of installation.
Is there any benefit from being higher on the roof?
So we don't do the angled up.
Okay.
We are all flush mounted.
Okay.
That's
got to look a lot better.
The pitched up is kind of an old school method. We don't do that because a couple reasons. It doesn't look good. There's not a need for it right now with how things have evolved. It's also a big wind loading issue.
Okay, that makes sense.
So you can think of that as like
especially
a sail.
here, we get real wind here.
It's a structural concern that we'd rather not worry about.
Do you get any benefit from just being higher though?
Yeah, if you have a bunch of trees and your roof is 20, 30 feet up, from the ground level, you think it's quite shaded, but when you're standing on a roof, it's actually not that bad because you've just elevated yourself a little bit above the tree line. So it depends, but there's no outside of shade no real benefit to that.
When's the best time that someone should consider doing this? You know, if I'm talking to a client and somehow we get on the topic of solar and they're thinking like, that's something I'm interested in. Is it when their roof needs to be replaced? Is it any time?
Yeah, when they have a newer roof is obviously a good step, but the right time for a homeowner is really when they're ready. You know, this is a big purchase, it's a big change. When you're financially ready, when you have time, when it feels right, when you understand it, definitely don't just jump into it because you want to do it. I mean, it's something that you have to do your research, understand. It has to line up with your financials. I mean, it's tens of thousands of dollars up front. You'll obviously get a lot of that back, but it's whenever it places in your life at that particular moment is the time to do it.
This was fun. I knew nothing about solar beforehand. I didn't even think you could do it here. I've totally flipped on the perspective now, and it's really cool to know.
Perfect. Thanks for having me out.
Appreciate it. Absolutely.